responsibility. It's none of my concern anymore.
This was an address different in tone and content to his speech of Tuesday night. Wishful thinkers might hope it sounded almost valedictory. Or perhaps in arguing that he isn't really leader and therefore isn't in charge, it was simply a denial of responsibility.
Peace be on Al Zawiya and its people.
Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Well, as Lawrence mentioned there was a meeting of Libyan tribal leaders in Al Baida today, and among the leaders who was there was Libya's former justice minister. He's just one of a stream of former loyalists who have now abandoned Gaddafi. He resigned 3 days ago, and he spoke to Al Jazeera today, warning that Gaddafi has biological weapons and will not hesitate to use them.
Tripoli is the current and the future capital of Libya. Its people know how the current regime is unjust and oppressive, but they are now oppressed in an unprecedented way. They are surrounded by military camps from the east, south and west. These camps are led by the sons of Gaddafi. We call on the international community and the UN to prevent Gaddafi from going on with his plans in Tripoli. Gaddafi owns everything. He owns weapons in the camps supervised by his sons. He also owns destructive, bacterial and chemical weapons. At the end, and when he is really pressured, he can do anything. I think Gaddafi will burn everything left behind him.
Well, our correspondent has managed to make it into eastern Libya for her own safety. We are not going to name her or tell you exactly where she is, but she joins us now live with the latest from the eastern part of the country, which they tell us is now under the control of the protesters. But given the activity we've seen closer to Tripoli and the comments from Gaddafi today, is there a fear there that they may soon be under attack again as well?
Well, there's certainly an apprehension. People here do feel that they are controlling the towns and cities and the area here. But certainly many would tell you that Gaddafi is unpredictable and they don't take his words very lightly. Along the streets, wherever you go, you'll see popular committees or youth committees who are trying to protect the towns and cities. They have weapons because all the army barracks have been overrun by them and they have been able to get hold of the weapons that were inside there. So they are protecting themselves. They are armed, but they do say also that Gaddafi knows very well that this part of the country is a tribal area, and he knows that the tribes will put up for a fight.
And we had that meeting of the tribal leaders in Baida today, and we've just shown some of the comments from the former justice minister. Do they have the sense now that there is enough momentum behind this movement with the defections that we've seen, with the apparent disappearance of the Gaddafi loyalists, that the east of the country is now going to, I don't know, stand as its own state, or they just think this is part of an overall end to the Gaddafi regime in its totality?
Well, they do think that the end of the Gaddafi rule over the country is coming soon. You were talking about this meeting in Baida. In that meeting, you had several commanders of the army, of the armed forces, of the police who had actually switched sides. Most of the military in this area and the police soldiers, everybody has deserted. So there is an idea that really it's the noose is tightening, if I could say that, around Gaddafi. They are in constant communication with the west of the country, and they do know that also the west of the country there is a similar situation developing. So there is a sort of momentum, if you want, that this could very well lead to the end, or at least isolate the government of Gaddafi to Tripoli and the surrounding areas. And actually at that meeting today, they were talking about the way ahead. They were talking about whether they should start writing a new constitution. They were talking about how to bring back civilian rule and certainly how to bring back security and stability.
Are they expecting any action from the international community to help them?
Well, they have been wondering, really, the reaction of the international community. Some people told me that they thought that the international community so far has been extremely weak. They do blame that specifically when it comes to Europe because of the economic ties between Libya and European countries, mainly Italy. But they have been wondering why the White House hasn't been more vocal about the situation here. They compare it to what happened in both Tunisia and Egypt, and they say that the people here in Libya have certainly been the most attacked the most, if you want, or suffered the most so far, and the reaction from the international community, as far as they see it, has been the most muted.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. That's our correspondent in the east of Libya. Now, Italy has been pleading for EU help to face what they say is a looming exodus of Libyans of unparalleled proportions. There are concerns that up to 1.5 million migrants and refugees might flood out of the country should Gaddafi fall. But Gemini Pandya with the International Organization for Migration says it's probably too soon to tell whether that will happen.
I think it's very early days to be worried about a mass outflow of migrants or Libyan refugees from Libya to Europe. As you have reported, and what we've seen over the past few days is that actually people are moving across land borders into Egypt and Tunisia rather than going by sea northwards to Europe. And the people who have largely been leaving Libya have been Egyptians and Tunisians going back to their home countries. And other migrants from other nationalities have been leaving in much smaller numbers. I think you have to look back into history for some kind of an understanding. When Libya was a major transit country for irregular immigration into Europe, at the height of it, which was in 2008, the migrants who left in that year from Libya, about 38,000 of them, which is actually a tiny, tiny number in comparison to the number of migrants who come into Europe from other parts of the world and through other routes. Anyway, those figures, actually, there were hardly any Libyans, if at all, leaving Libya at a time when actually it was quite easy for them to do so. The migrants who did use that route were people from all over Africa and also some from the Middle East. But since 2009, that route has stopped essentially with the patrolling, and there's nothing to say at the moment that this would resume again on any kind of scale such as that. And even I think I think it's at the moment it's important for Europe to actually look not so much at what could happen to Europe in the weeks or months to come, but actually focus its attention on what's actually happening in Egypt and Tunisia, two countries who have themselves undergone a lot of change very recently, who are in transit and who are now seeing outflows not only of their or rather inflows not only of their own nationals coming home, but could also see people from many other nationalities seeking refuge in their territory.
Well, we have, of course, seen a number of people trying to flee Libya already. Our correspondent Jamal El-Shail is monitoring the flow of people across one border crossing, the one that divides Libya from Egypt.
Thousands of Egyptians continue to flood this border crossing behind me, fleeing the violence